Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Alice Gyamfi. I am an associate at DLA Piper in their New York office. And today I'm here in conversation with esteemed arbitrator, professor, Dr. Emilia Onyema. Dr. Emilia Onyema is a professor of international commercial law at SOAS, University of London. She is dual qualified in both Nigeria and a solicitor in England and Wales. She's also a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and an independent arbitrator. She's a member of the advisory committee on the Cairo Regional Center for ICA. She chairs the advisory council of the Libya Center for ICA, and she's also the lead researcher of the SOAS Arbitration in Africa survey reports, and she co-authored the African Promise. We are here today in conversation about the 8th annual Ghana SOAS Arbitration in Africa Conference. Dr. Emilia, welcome.
Thank you very much, Alice. It's lovely to be back. Thank you.
Absolutely. So given that this is the 8th annual SOAS Arbitration in Africa Conference, the theme this year is enhancing the role of counsel and arbitrator in African arbitration. How did this year's theme emerge?
Thank you again for this wonderful opportunity to talk with you and colleagues about the work that we're doing. So the theme this year emerged from our own, really a shift in the focus of what our conferences, our SOAS Arbitration in Africa conference series, what it's now about. We recognize that there's so many arbitration related events happening in various parts of Africa, to which we also contribute. And we felt that instead of having another conference, that we should do something that focuses more on developing practice, the practice of African arbitration practitioners, either as counsel, arbitrator, tribunal secretary, or expert. And the idea is have a plenary where we can pick up on questions based on practice that attendees would have sent in. Now, the difference is that our sessions now, our conferences are not open to everybody. They're open only to those who actually maintain an arbitration practice.
Okay.
That way we can participate in continuous professional development through engaging and sharing our own experience of everybody in the room regarding particular practice.
I think that's an excellent kind of shift in focus because, as you know, coming off of the pandemic, we have all done so many virtual conferences. Mm-hmm. So shifting now to practice-ready training, making sure that practitioners have the substantive skills is something that, we may have been lacking during the pandemic. I know you ran a training this year, counsel advocacy training. So can you talk to me a little bit more about that training and how you conceived of it? Is that something that was kind of the precursor of the theme of the conference?
So the counsel training, what had happened was it's in reaction to experiences in the field. So we're hearing from arbitrators who sit on the continent or on Africa-related matters on the continent that we can do with better counsel representation. There are, as we all know, the market there are various layers to the legal market on the continent. There are very top law firms who are really, really good. And then you have those who can do much better. And so one of the things we also heard was this whole idea of bringing in litigation tactics and practice into international arbitration. And so we felt that there was a clear gap in the market and that we needed to do some skills-based training. So it's not enough to just say this is how you do it, but actually show people how to do it and then allow them to practice and get feedback from those who sit as arbitrators and get some peer feedback. So that was what led to this particular project. And what we then did was we took a case study, which we circulated. We put the participants in groups of claimant respondent, and they went head to head. And we have 3 days. The first day we look at case theory, case strategy. We look at the primary submission is on the opening submission on the first day. On the second day, we deal with expert examination. And we do have a couple of experts firms, quantum expert firms that have worked with us. And so they have acted as expert witnesses, quantum expert witnesses, to be cross-examined and re-examined by the participants. And they have also added great value in holding webinars to explain and help participants fully understand the role of experts. We also have fact witnesses that they would cross-examine and re-examine. And then day 3, we then pick up on ethics and expectations of the tribunal, and we do written and oral closing submissions to the tribunal. And we've got really, really very strong positive rave reviews that it's been an amazing journey for those who have taken it. We had 97 participants.
Wow.
We ran it in 4 jurisdictions. We ran it in Lagos, Douala, Kigali, and Cairo. And next year, we have double of that. We have 8 jurisdictions that are willing for us to come and run the same project. We will use a different case study, of course. And this time around, we want to sort of include legal experts as well from the particular jurisdiction. So it's been great. And it's been, we've received financial support from the Africa Legal Support Facility attached to the Africa Development Bank. And so a huge thanks to them for that support and that vote of confidence in the work that we're doing.
It seems like the program, is adversarial. You said that they're going head to head. So it's really mimicking what you would actually engage in at a hearing. I think you also said that you had practitioners who are stepping in to play these various roles.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
It's been really, really amazing. And then having it in people's own language, the language
wow.
that we run it in English, in French, and the Cairo training, we had English and Arabic, and we had panels in Arabic and a different panel in English. And that's the way we want to proceed. Next year, we will also have it in Portuguese. We're doing a Lusophone version, which is very interesting. Now we're sort of really looking forward to that.
Oh, that's going to be excellent. I feel like Lusophone Africa is often underrepresented regionally,
Yes.
So I think that's going to be excellent.
Yes, yes. So we're quite excited that we're expanding it that way because we want to be able to cover the vast majority of the.
Excellent. So for those practitioners who are watching this and thinking, I'm in South Africa, right? I would love to be a part of a program like this. Is there anything that they can do to either help assemble or work with their local institution to bring this counsel advocacy training to their city?
That's what they need to do. Speak with their local arbitration center. So someone like AFSA, for example,
right?
And we would be happy with the organizations to bring that to them, because we go to the continent. We're not expecting them to come and to come to London for this. We go to the jurisdiction, and we then also use local practitioners that we know and the participants know do international arbitration. So that gives the work that we do legitimacy. We're not just going out there to shout at people or talk at them. we work with them, we learn with them. It's very collaborative. Yes.
Excellent. So I'm wondering, I know that this is an incredible effort by yourself and SOAS. I'm thinking now about disputes firms and how firms can best prepare young lawyers to serve as counsel and things like that in a way that creates a more meaningful pipeline to becoming an arbitrator, because I see, through SOAS, these kind of independent trainings. But what can law firms do who house these associates and are really responsible for their development, due to advance the skills of associates and counsel?
So two major things. One is training. And so this sort of training, and they can ask us, we're happy to come in-house and run it for them, bespoke. Quite a number of law firms organize this sort of trainings anyway for their associates and younger colleagues. But they can't stop at training because you're in the law firm and the law firm gets this sort of work. And so my view is that the senior colleagues within the law firms would need to begin to trust our younger colleagues and associates and allow them to, it's not just doing the research, but do some drafting,
Right.
do some oral advocacy as well. And in doing that, they become more confident. They learn how to do these things better, and they're seen. Because arbitration is one of those things people need to see. They need to see you do. And then they then know that, yes, you can do this. And in seeing other people, seeing their younger colleagues actually making oral submissions and all of that would give those other people confidence that when the opportunity arises, this person, I have seen this person in action, they can't do this.
You're absolutely right. There's something very different about learning when you're learning by doing, than just learning by watching someone else do.
Yes.
And this kind of, progressive learning, helps to make sure, as you said, that younger associates get those opportunities, because it's difficult to build your profile in this, practice group if all you've ever done is shadow someone do, right? It's difficult.
Yeah, because shadowing is not doing.
Right.
And it's not the same. There is no amount of prepping that when you have to get up and make that oral submission to the tribunal and answer those questions, it is not what you've prepped. Yes, you do a lot of preparation. Different. It is different. And, you can make mistakes, fine, but you learn from it.
Absolutely. So I'm wondering if you can speak to a little bit, to senior partners in law firms or, very senior counsel in law firms who think, in theory, that sounds wonderful. I would love to give, my mid-level associates or my, mid-level counsel the opportunity to have more hands-on experiences, speak to the tribunal directly, but, the case is so complex, right? The amount at issue is so large that I don't want to chance it. Are there particular points within a hearing or a case where you think it would be good to slot in a mid-level or a junior level associate where they can take ownership of some small aspect while still kind of, assuaging any of the partners' concerns that may be too big of a chunk for them to handle?
I think things like case management conferences.
Okay.
Things with the tribunal, depending on the nature of, what the meeting is about. I think those core procedural issues, those are, associates can be given the opportunity with the senior colleague in the room. So if anything goes wrong, they can quickly step in and set things right. But I think that they can do that. I think that associates should be bold enough to ask. I was attending an event, and the speaker said, you have to ask. There's nothing wrong with asking. You have to be bold enough to ask and say, I would like to be in this case, I would like to be able to do this, and you prepare and prep and prep and prep, so that, if you're lucky and they say yes, you put your best foot forward and you do an excellent job. So I think it goes both to risk that.
That's absolutely true. I mean, I think a lot of times as junior and mid levels, we kind of think, the partners at the top and the senior counsel have it in hand and they'll dole out the assignments, but you need to be 100% in charge and invested in your own career to, as you say, make the ask. And so sometimes, being a little bit more assertive, asking for what you want will get you far. But I think it's, from the mid-level and junior level perspective, it can be a little bit daunting.
I agree. And I fully appreciate that. But the truth is, the best you can do is to ask.
Yeah.
And the case is being discussed, the preparations are being done, you've done the reading, you've sort of done some research, you've thought through it, and you're doling out ideas. The partners are listening. They can see that. And so that's all your job is to ask. Worst case scenario, it's a no. And then you're like, okay, fine. Why is it a no? And they say, well, we don't think you're prepared yet, or you're ready yet, or whatever. And then, okay, fine, I can live with that. I'll keep preparing, but at least you've put the marker down that I would want to do this. And I'm putting in the effort, I'm putting in the work. They will take notice. They will take notice.
That's very good advice. If anything, the worst they can do is, as you said, say no.
And then you ask for a reason. You're entitled to know why no. The way it's feedback. Yes, it is feedback.
I want to talk a little bit now about the African Promise, because I think it's just such an impactful pact that you've made. I mean, you established the African Promise in 2019, and the Promise has marshaled law firm counsel, in-house counsel, arbitrators, sovereigns, institutions, academics. I mean, the full spectrum of the stakeholders in international arbitration who are committed to improving and enhancing the profile and representation of African arbitrators, especially in arbitrations that are connected to Africa. And you're asking them to both make the commitment and then do it. Right?
Yes.
Using some of the steps that we talked about. And you've outlined a number of those doing steps to help these stakeholders. I'm wondering, which of these steps do you think is the most impactful?
For me, I think that because of the private nature of arbitration, we don't get information. We need information. And the particular information that will be useful is, yes, we know who and how many the institutions that produce statistics and annual report, how many they appoint. What we do not know are how many nominations have been made. And for me, I think that if we can get information, even if it's just bare numbers, from institutions and law firms to say in 2021, we nominated or shortlisted 30 arbitrators of African origin or African arbitrators in 40 cases that we had. What that does is that it speaks to those colleagues who say, we don't know any Africans.
Right.
Because the people they know Africans that they can appoint. So which means it goes back to validate the point we've been making, that there were qualified people that can be appointed. So that's the first point. The second point for me is that for those Africans, it then means they get the confidence that my peers believe that I can't be appointed.
Yes.
You don't make the shortlist, you're not getting appointed.
Mm-hmm.
If we know that people are making the shortlist, then we know that it is only a matter of time that those numbers will start moving in the right direction.
So speaking of research, your survey reports are a staple in the industry. One, because when we hear, our colleagues say we don't know of any, African practitioners. We're not sure of, who can be appointed. We look at these survey reports and we know that the talent is there.
Yeah.
We know that the capacity is being built. And so I know that you are planning to launch the SOAS Arbitration in Africa 2022 report.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you can talk to me a little bit about the main findings of the report and what about the report makes you feel the most hopeful for arbitration in Africa?
Great, thank you so very much. So this is our first report since the end, in quotation marks, of the pandemic. And so one of the things we wanted to do was to hear from those who do arbitration in Africa on some major Africa-connected events. And so our third survey, our 2022 survey, we wanted to find out the impact of the pandemic on people's arbitration practice, what's the impact of climate change and what the plans towards that are. Those are two global events that are impacting on arbitration and arbitration practitioners. And then we had two Africa-specific events. And one, you can't talk about Africa these days without talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement.
Yes.
And so we wanted to know expectations and state of preparedness. The fourth point was on the infrastructure projects that are ongoing on the continent and who is being used for this, the nature of the laws that are being used for this. And I think from our findings, just looking at the executive summary, one of the things that strikes me is, again, you go back to the impact of COVID. COVID is the way it's impacted on practitioners across the globe, the same way it's impacted on practitioners in Africa-related disputes. The second thing is that there's a close correlation between the impact and the response to the impact of COVID and climate change. People are traveling less, people are doing more virtually, and people are doing less printing. So green arbitration will be very pleased. People are doing less printing. People are concerned about their carbon footprint, which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the huge difference is the power deficit, the infrastructure deficit in some African countries. The fact that some law firms and some practitioners have to run diesel generator to generate power to work, and the additional costs that lays on their practice that came through. I think that's really important because when we talk about greener arbitrations and we're talking about access and technology poverty, we do need to appreciate that it is not exactly the same. It's not a level playing field for everybody, and that access it might be limited in some places. As it relates to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, there's some knowledge, there's good knowledge actually of that. And there's, as you can imagine, with lots of lawyers, there's that expectation and hope, even with the climate change, that there will be more disputes, trade-related disputes, intra-Africa disputes, and there will be more environmental disputes. And so lawyers are prepping themselves, hoping that more arbitrations will come their way in relation to that. In relation to infrastructure projects, I think the surprising finding is the fact that, and maybe not so surprising, that most government-related infrastructure projects, that the law of the state is the law that governs those contracts. Which is really an interesting finding of that. And then as it relates, we also found that as it relates to the use of technical experts, there is still, again, we have a shortfall. We have a major deficit as foreign experts are used in most of these disputes, which is, again, and it's a known, we've known this, but I think it's good that we now have some data to back that up. So for me, those are the major interesting findings that of the report.
That's hopeful. That's very hopeful. And when you said, for example, that with regard to experts even in Africa-related arbitrations are typically coming from outside of the continent, I thought about Justice Keba Mbaye's remarks. This is, I mean, almost 40 years ago during the 60th anniversary of the ICC arbitration, where he talked about why some African states were reluctant to embrace arbitration, saying that international arbitrations have historically taken place primarily under the auspices of Western arbitral institutions in Western venues before disproportionately large numbers of Western arbitrators at Western prices with, you know, Western experts, it sounds like. How much do you think this has either changed or perhaps still rings true since he made them almost 40 years ago?
It's still very true, which is what what makes our work relevant. It remains true. The only thing that has changed a little bit is that maybe we can exchange the Western. We now describe them as international arbitral,
right,
and all of that, but basically still the same Western arbitral institutions and, you know, Western venues and Western arbitrators and currencies and all of that. Where I think we've made some gains is that we're talking about it.
Right.
We're seeing the optics don't look good anymore. It's not business as usual. Where, you know, society is evolving, society is changing, society is beginning to accept that we're a rainbow, there are different colors, different peoples, but we're in the same space. And society, having accepted that, more of that, it's come into different professional spaces, including arbitration. And so we're talking about inclusivity, we're talking about diversity. It would be rare to have a conference now where, you know, that isn't on the agenda, or there isn't a panel that would look at those sorts of questions. So I think to that extent, the fact that we're talking about it is some progress that we've made, because we've vindicated Mbaye's point. We've said, yes, we recognize that this is actually true. The second point is that we do need to step back a little bit and ask ourselves, who are the culprits? Who are responsible for this? So if you have, and I prefer to use the example of African governments, because we know that even in commercial transactions, it's African governments and states that do the big transactions. If you are an African government and you have a dispute, and the first thing you do is to call the City of London, or you run to New York or wherever, to an international law firm, it's your problem, it's your fault. And we need to take responsibility. And we're saying to African businesses and to African governments, you do need to rethink the strategy, because you're putting yourselves in the foot. It doesn't mean that if you appoint an African as arbitrator, you will win. That is not the point. The point is that you do have, and this is not a moral right or obligation, but it is, for me, you do have that obligation to consider the continent first. And if you have to use counsel outside of the continent, then it should be co-counseling through counsel that is on the continent. And counsels, law firms on the continent have relationships with international law firms and foreign law firms that they work with. But it can't be the other way around, wherein you find out, and then they come back in and then hire research law firms to do research on local law for them. I mean, we can't carry on that. And so we need to recognize that we can do something about this. If every single dispute that is connected to the continent that has an African party also includes an African law firm as counsel, we would have many more African arbitrators, because African counsel would know those African arbitrators that they can put on the shortlist. And that is important. And then, for African lawyers who still remain in their colonial minds and think that everything Western is better than everything African, then, they would soon become those in the minority, find something else to dry it out and to think straight. And we need to confront people and say to them, this is what it is. And you do need to rethink the strategy, because it just isn't working. And we continue to do that work, and that is important. And the last thing I would say on this is, because I have heard, and in my own presence, it's been said, if the choice of law is, for example, English law, or New York law, or French law, why do I need an African? And so if that is the if that is the measuring parameter, then why would you accept English law, French law, New York law? What makes them neutral? They're national laws, so they're not neutral laws. So why would you choose those in your laws? And we are making this. We have to. My job is to give those who enter into such transactions, give them that information, that it's negotiation. So if why would you want to choose foreign law to govern a transaction that impacts more on your own economy, on your own citizens, and on your own jurisdiction? So we very much believe that we will see movement, and we're beginning to see movement, and that is important. We're not relying on non-Africans to appoint us. We have to start with our own first.
Absolutely. So this sounds like one multi-tiered approach, but it's also very thorough, right? And on one hand, you're talking about accountability, even inside of the continent, right? Making sure that we are giving either, sovereigns or law firms the information that they need to appoint arbitrators. And for sovereigns, it's both, right? Arbitrators and counsel, appointing them locally. And then you're also approaching the other side when we talk about making sure that these individuals are well trained, well qualified, and then going a step further, helping them build their profile and reputation. So once they're well trained and well qualified, they can get onto the list.
Yes,
Yeah.
but that is, arbitration is hydra-headed.
Yes.
It's not a one track or a one tunnel visioned space. It isn't. And that is important, because if I'm saying Alice needs to be on this list, Alice has to be compared, her qualifications, her experience has to be comparative to others on the list and others on the panel. You don't want to appoint somebody just because they are African and
Right.
then have two non-Africans that basically zone the African out on the panel. That's no use. That's not the sort of thing we want to do. But we believe that there are Africans who are qualified, who know what they're doing, and who are confident and can stand their ground and do the work that this entails. So why not?
Why not indeed, Professor Emilia? That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Where they have, comparable experience, expertise, and then they have the direct understanding of, the relevant national law, contract law, procedural law. Why not? Absolutely. Professor Emilia, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I am very much looking forward to the 2022 SOAS Arbitration in Africa Conference and looking forward to hearing more about what the participants have to say and how we can truly enhance the role of counsel and arbitrators on the African continent broadly. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Alice. Thank you. Very grateful. Thank you.